All right. What's up, guys? Another edition, Scummy Unplugged. I want to thank all you guys for just checking out the magazine, this section. Today, we got an action-packed crew. We got Greg Hannley, creator and owner of Sober Recovery and this magazine. Tim Ryan, which you have your own rehab centers we'll get into. And actress and model Jennifer Gimenez.
Ooh,
How are you guys?
You got it right.
Yeah, I got it right.
He's so sweet.
It was I thought I was gonna butcher that, but we did it.
You're so cute.
You were on the cover of a past issue.
I was. Like, honestly, I've been on covers for my modeling days. This honestly is the best cover I've ever done. Like, I'm so proud of, because it represents so much of who I am. It represents everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it was like when I look at that, I go, oh my gosh, like, my recovery, my story actually matters. You know, like, I matter. For so long in my life, I didn't think I mattered. And to know today that, you know, I have a voice is so beautiful. So thank you for allowing me to have a voice.
Well, you know, you're a different type of inspiration now. When you're modeling and acting, people are inspired to be models or actors.
Yeah.
And as a recovery advocate, people are inspired to get their life back on track and be better people.
You'd
That's a big deal.
You'd be amazed at the amount of messages Jennifer will receive through Instagram or Facebook. I read your article. You talked about this. You gave me the inspiration to, as we say, put our hand up and ask for help, or I'm now 30 days sober. And sometimes you sit back and it's like, wow, I am making a difference just by doing the next right thing that we're taught to do in recovery.
Yeah.
And I think by speaking out, we were just talking about that, you know, like social media, you know, how fake it is. And like, I think by being open about recovery and where you came from, man, it's just all these people that come at you, man, like, I'm not the only person out there. And like what you guys are doing, and that's why we got you guys in here together. Kind of the new power couple. You guys kind of linked up, and I did an interview on both of you guys on my podcast, and hearing you guys' story, how you guys got together and what you're doing as a whole, that's why we got you guys in here. So I don't know how we're going to split this up, because both of you guys have amazing stories of where you came from, recovery. So do you kind of want to get into kind of your story, because you got a gnarly one? And
I mean, I can give you just a quick thumbnail sketch, but normally ladies first.
Oh, wow.
I like
That's
that.
a lot of pressure. Thank you. That was so sweet.
Yeah.
Honey.
Jennifer, you're up.
I guess, what was the question?
Just kind of did, you know, why you're here.
Well,
where you came from.
Where I came from. So we were talking about this a little earlier before we started rolling, is I was born in California, and my family's from Argentina. They decided to come to America, have an American child, name me one of the most common names, Jennifer, and raise me back in Argentina. And my parents realized when I was 6.5 years old that my little brother and I would probably have more opportunities in America than in Argentina. So we came back to California, and you know, I grew up in San Gabriel Valley and learning English. I didn't speak your language. I spoke Spanish. And when I was around 13, I was 13 years old. I was 2 months shy of turning 14. I was at the Santa Monica Pier with my mom, my little brother, on a Sunday afternoon. And Bruce Weber, who to this day is one of the biggest photographers in the world, came up to my mom and I and said, you know, can I shoot your daughter? She has the right look for this designer. And it just happened to have been one of the biggest designers in the world. And my life went from growing up in Argentina on dirt roads and donkeys and cobblestones to becoming a supermodel overnight.
It's like the American dream. That's
I know, it's crazy. I mean, it's like, I look back now and I'm like, wow, that's my story. Like that, you know, when I talk about it still, like I remember those moments so clearly. And, you know, I became the provider of my family, and I got thrown in this adult entertainment world where I was literally selling sex when I didn't know what that was about. My life was all about the outside stuff. You know, I was only as good as my next job cover campaign. So those early teenage years when we are taught like self-worth, dignity, grace, integrity, I wasn't being taught that. You know, my voice never mattered. And to say, like, sit here today and like have a platform and be able to sit with you three men and have this conversation is amazing, because my voice, you know, somewhat matters now today.
It does.
And I learned to find my voice. My addiction and my recovery it has not been easy. Nowhere in any anonymous book does it say, you have to look cute while recovering, because that is not my story. I took my first drink when I was 12 years old from trauma from childhood. And, and I remember in Argentina, people used to drink and they would have fun.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to feel that feeling. My disease, didn't manifest overnight, but I do believe it's a gene and it's hereditary. My family tree is very apparent to me. I know where that is, and the progression of my disease has led me to everything and anything else. I also suffer from mental illness, and I think it's so important to talk about that today, because I don't want to bring any shame. I don't want people to feel shame about having mental illness or, eating disorders. I have that. I suffered from that. I've overcome that. I was pretty much diagnosed everything when I got sober.
Did it start from the drinking, going back to where your addiction led you? Was it mainly alcohol?
Well,
and that's what really
drinking, became habitual throughout the years.
Yeah.
But when I was, and I tried many different drugs in the modeling world, and I was 5'6" when I got discovered, and I'm now 5'10". So my body started developing, and the supermodels taught me how to eat boxes of laxatives and lettuce and, all those fun eating disorders, and they're not really fun, kicked in. And, drugs were kind of just okay, whatever, that made me feel like this or that. But when I was close to 18 years old, I was with these two girls. They were models. They were everything in my eyes. And they brought out this white china plate. And at this point in my life, I was a great chameleon. I believe it's one of our survival mechanisms.
Yeah.
And whatever movements they were doing, I was doing, and they bring out this white china plate. They pour all this white powder on there. They chop it all up, roll this $100 bill, and they start snorting away. And they were like, "Do you want some?" And I was like, "Yeah, I haven't tried some in a while." I'd never tried cocaine up until that moment. But I got to tell you, the moment I did that first line, I was hooked. For me, cocaine gave me a heartbeat like nothing else ever has.
Yeah.
In the end, it betrayed me and it brought me to my knees. But what drugs and alcohol did for me is it told me I was beautiful, it told me I was smart, it told me I mattered, it told me it'd never leave me or abandon me. It was my best friend, my lover, my everything. And it told me all these things until it stopped telling me. And then I was in quest for more, and like they say in the 12-step, rooms is, one is, what is it, that saying? I just forgot it. Oh my God.
Well, I'll interrupt you. I mean, with it's interesting with addicts. It's all the same, when you do that first drug, it feels like it's going to give you everything. You feel like all your problems go away, and it just slowly turns the other way where you need it, and then you start losing everything. Everyone, there's not one successful drug addict out there. So
there's not.
There's not.
So
but when you do it for the first, I remember my first line of coke.
Yeah.
We're still looking for that guy. That first line of coke. It's like, dude, this is rad. I want to be on this shit the rest of my life. This is perfect. Never turns that way at the end.
A lot of us. So I tell a story about a friend of mine who became a pro hockey player, and we're doing coke one night, and he did about 3 lines, and he said, "I'm done." I said, "What do you mean? I got a half ounce." He said, "I like this too much," and never did it again. But I go back to the first time I did a line of cocaine at 15. Me and 3 guys split a quarter gram. We each did 1 line. My buddies went home, and I went right up to that guy and said, "Do you have any more?" And he said, "I have a half gram. I'll split it with you. You owe me $25 on Friday." The first time I tried the drug, I was already having it fronted. And that took over my life for a number of years, and then throwing heroin and everything else. And
there's no such thing as stopping.
No, it's
until it was done.
Exactly.
And I would see people get up in the middle and go, "Yeah, I'm good, I'm done." And I would go, "What?"
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
And even in the bar, when somebody's sipping a drink, you're like, "Well, why are they doing that?"
I feel like that too. Still now today, the one is too many, and a thousand's never enough.
Exactly.
For me, it was game on. That line took me to there was not I did a couple lines. It was about the drug. It was about the drinking drug.
When people ask me why I don't drink, I tell them because I really like cocaine.
Yeah.
You get it, yeah.
Go what? And I go,
that's a great one.
Yeah, no, I really like it. And for sure, if I take a sip off a drink, I'm going to look down. Sooner or later, I'm going to have a bag in my hand.
Absolutely.
For sure, and wreck my life.
And we were talking about this morning, getting ready. And I said, thank God that we don't do drugs together. I said, could you imagine us doing cocaine? And And what did you say? You know, I'm a level 10. I am at the max.
Yeah,
And I
that's
said,
what
I
you-
am too. There's no stopping until it's consequences. And
Before we get to both of you guys and how you guys are together, how did you change your life around, and what was that defining moment of your life where you're here right now at a Recovery Today magazine talking about sobriety? Like, what turned it around for you?
Well, you know, a lot of people talk about like my bottom, you know, and for me, I've had many bottoms. I
Yeah.
may even have more bottoms left, you know.
Yeah.
But I was, the first time I went into the rooms, I was going to get more, and I was early in the morning, and I was driving. I was going up this street called Fairfax. I'm sure you guys know about it. And there's this cross street called Fountain, and I was going to make a right on Fountain, and there's this, at the time it was a white building. Now, remember I showed it to you the other day. It's a different color, but I saw all these guys standing out there, and it was really early, and they're all tatted, and they're smoking. They had hats and hoodies, and I remember looking at them going, God, those hot guys, what are they doing there? It must be an after hours, you know? And I pulled over because I thought, oh, I can cop more stuff here for free, or drink or drugs. And I pulled in, and it was a 12-step meeting, and I was 21 years old. That was 21 years ago. Not fun to say my age, but
Wow.
I ended up going to the room that day, and I was watching everyone standing up, and it was like they were talking like wah 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 wah, you know, language.
So you were going to find drugs.
I was
and
in
then-
my guy's house. Yeah, my
So what
dealer.
made you want to go into this
'Cause
meeting?
I
Did you-
saw these hot people out
Okay.
there, and I thought it was an after hours. Like,
she thought it was a party.
I literally thought, I pulled over. I mean, I was paranoid and like jonesing, and I walk in there, and like I walk in, and I hear wah wah wah, and I go, oh shit, and they're all looking at me, and I'm very paranoid anyway, so I'm like, oh God, and I sit down by the door, and you know, I don't care if we're drunk or high or sober. We're very intelligent people,
Yeah.
us addicts and alcoholics, and they're standing up, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm like, do you have to intro yourself before the party starts? You know, and this guy stood up sitting next to me, and I was like, shoot, it's my turn. So I got up, and you know, all gacked out, and I was like, my name is Jennifer. I'm like, you? And they all applauded, and I like kind of waved and sat down. I was like, what am I doing? You know, Twilight Zone, I gotta go. Like, I'm bouncing. And I left, and as I was walking, you know, out, I hear this voice, and it was actually a real voice. It was a guy, and he was like, Jennifer? And I'm like, guy talking to me. And I turned around, I tried to be all seductive, and I was like, yeah, jaw grinding, nose dripping. And he's like, you know, there's a meeting here tomorrow at noon, you should come. And I'm like, all right, cool, thanks. And I'm thinking he so wants me, right? And I get in my car, and I'm like, gosh, that guy could be future boyfriend, husband. He's hot.
Yeah.
Drugs are the same thing for me at that time. And I get in my car, and I go home for him, and I ate for him, I showered for him, I slept for him, I got up for him, and I showed up the next day for him. And I go to that meeting, I showed up a little bit earlier, and I'm looking, and by the way, I never copped that day.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, and like there's more people, and they're all hugging me from the day before, and this one guy, I remember, hugged me really tight, and he's like, girl, you're not gacked out. And I was just like, what are you guys doing? You're so fake. And the meeting started, the meeting ended, and I got to tell you, I've never seen him since.
It's crazy.
And to me, I think he told me his name was Dave. I don't fully remember, but that day for me, that man was my angel, my Eskimo. All he was saying was keep coming back,
It's
and the seed was
interesting,
planted.
like how people get sober. Like that day was meant to happen.
It was, but I didn't stay sober.
Okay.
You know, I cleaned up, and then I got into acting, but
it put your foot in that door to
And
like realize
I
what
knew
that
there
world
a
was
place.
about. Yeah,
I knew there was a
exactly.
place. But my what got me here today is I went into treatment. I thought treatment was for losers. I was going under my terms, 5 days. I checked in July 12th of 05. I left. I left there April 30th of 06. I did relapse in there. And when I checked back in on January 15th of 06, they tested me. I tested positive for heroin, speed, horse tranquilizer, rat poison, gasoline, name it. It was in there. My
You
dealer.
had the rat poison and the gasoline?
Yeah, I did. It was
Nice.
bad.
Good
And like
stuff.
I'd not out. I thought I was buying cocaine, and it was, yeah. So I had to detox in the psych ward there, a place in Pasadena. And when I walked into that psych ward, I remember the double door slamming shut and all the from the locks. And there was a line friends and family couldn't cross, and they take away the sharp objects. objects, any plastic, anything you can hurt yourself or anyone else away from you. And I just felt like dead woman walking. And I saw a guy sitting down in a wheelchair, and his eyes were rolling back, and he was drooling. There was a guy getting jumped by 2 techs. He was trying to run down the corridor naked. God bless him. And my room was the last room to the left. The techs knew me because I'd been there before at the treatment center, and I needed to go to the restroom. They needed to get the rest of the paperwork, and there was no doors connecting to the bathroom and to the bedroom. And when I got up, I realized they forgot the belt, and just like that, I looked up. There was all these objects on the ceiling. I got on top of one of the beds. I put my belt through there. I secured my belt through one of the objects. I put my neck through that, and I hung myself. And the last thing I remember that day was my feet were dangling and everything went black. And when I came to, I was in a 5-point strap. And because of the fixation, I couldn't speak. It took me 3 months to learn to form sentences. I shook profusely. That dwindled down. My hands and feet. 9 months I took. I had no control of my bodily functions. I wore Depends. I like to call them diapers. I would try to get up, and my brain worked perfectly. So I would say, right foot move, and I'd fall. I was in a wheelchair. From the wheelchair, I went to a walker. Then I went to a cane. Then I freely learned to walk again. That took around 5-6 months. And like to be sitting here right now is a miracle. And to somewhat make sense is a miracle.
It is. And that's why it's so amazing having all these different people in this studio just to show that, like, man, it can be done.
Yeah.
Like without that's a crazy story, but you're here right now.
When you go
like,
from that to this,
like it can be done.
The possibilities are endless of where you're going to go, but you can find people all along the way that can relate to you.
Exactly.
And if you don't have a story like that, there's people that they don't have that hopelessness. I mean, they don't have the. They have to see somebody who hung themselves and went through that for them to go, well, if they could do it,
I can do it.
maybe.
Exactly.
All I needed was just a glimmer of hope, because at that time, and especially in your situation, that was your only way out.
That was.
You had no other choice, and there was nothing else there was nothing that was going to change anything.
No.
And we might not have gotten to that point. I don't know if you ever hung yourself or
No,
you
but
did.
what was it? Share the line when you were strapped in that 5-point harness that you say, I'm in this vessel called me.
Yeah, I mean, like when I came to, I literally was so upset because I couldn't live and I couldn't die correctly. And I've heard so many people say that to me before. Like, you know, I wouldn't kill myself, but I would just try not to wake up, you know, and I understand that. And I just realized, like, you know, I was so mad because I realized that I was stuck in this, you know, hell of a vessel, and it was me. It was called me. And, you know, what had happened was I remember one day I was by the window, and there's like at the place I was at, there was open meetings and stuff, and I was holding onto the bars, and it was a double window with frost on it, and I was hanging on tightly in my wheelchair, and I could hear people, and somebody was telling a joke, and everyone was laughing, and far away someone was yelling at someone, and I felt this feeling that I didn't understand. I heard all this chatter. I could smell their smokes from the cigarettes, and I literally said in my head, and I kid you not, I said, God, is it humanly possible for me to feel whatever it is they're feeling? I'll go to any lengths.
Yeah.
And I have the chills when I say this because that day was my day of surrender. And like, I always say, like, that girl that said that day in that wheelchair still resides so alive inside of me, you know, and I'll go to any lengths. And that has been such a process for me the last 13 years, you know. I was in such a bad place last year. Like, when January hit, when the new year hit, I was like, I made it, you know, and then the next day the cover came out, and I was like, thank you, God. Like, and it was a lot of endings in my life last year. But what had happened was, in a relationship, I realized that I was holding on to something that wasn't there, and I was deceived, and that I realized the lesson. I realized the lesson as it was happening. I realized everything I didn't want and everything I did want in someone, in a partner. I was stuck in a job that, in a career that I wasn't really growing, you know, and I stayed stuck. I got comfortable in the uncomfortable, you know, and that was like, it was kind of such a strange year last year for me because there was a lot of endings. And yet again, I had to remember that girl that was in the wheelchair that day, you know, as I talk about it now. And, you know, I said to God, and I've like literally, you know, one day I was like in December, I was in Florida and I was in my place in Florida and I was hanging on to in the balcony of my room and outside, and I was like, I should just jump. Like, what's the point? Like, no one would care. And all of a sudden I freaked out because I realized I wanted to die. Like, because things were going on, you know, and I got on my knees and like, I just went, God, I'm not getting up until you remove this obsession and take this away from me. Show me a sign. And the next day I got a sign, and then a few weeks later I got a sign, and I talked to Tim, and we were talking about, you know, he reached out to me and we were talking about like doing this, you know, having this platform and you know, keep spreading the message, because like ultimately I always ask God, I pray for a platform so I could keep carrying the message and helping people, because this epidemic it's killing so many people, and it's heartbreaking right now.
It is, and
you know?
I think that's where Tim comes in your story.
Yeah, you know, you can buy my book on Amazon. I make $6. No, I'm only joking. You know, as I look back, I didn't have a bad life. You know, I'll give you the 2-minute, 3-minute version. My dad worked at the Chicago Board of Trade for 26 years, was senior vice president of EF Hut. My mom co-founded what ultimately became a multi-billion-dollar nonprofit. We had dinner every night at 6:30. We're all adopted. My little brother and sister are Native American. My older brother, he's just an ass. But what I struggled with was the learning disabilities, the dyslexia. My older brother was a narcissist, throwing the molested by the babysitter at 10, 11 years old. The only thing I cared about was water skiing, as motorcycles. I grew up on a lake from 14 to 21. I was one of the top-ranked barefoot water skiers in the country. I show skied. I 3-event skied. But I started drinking it in early age. Cocaine came in. I struggled in school. School wasn't my forte, you know, 1.4 grade average, 11 on the ACT. I took it 5 times. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. Went to college because they had open admissions to get on the water ski team, and got into, you know, ecstasy and hallucinogenics and more cocaine. I was always looking to be altered. I had a bumper sticker on the back of my 78 Ford Fairmont that said, "In search of the eternal buzz." I was always searching for happiness through drugs and alcohol, when in hindsight they caused all my problems.
Yep.
I was great at starting businesses. I made my first million at 22. I lost it by 23. And then I stumbled into the technology space, and at 21 years old was my first time in treatment. And I checked myself in, and I liked treatment. I went through the motions, and guy came in and spoke and said, you know, 1/3 of you will be dead in a year, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, what do I do? He said, get a sponsor, go to meetings, work the steps. Simple enough. Well, for the next 25 years, I'm the guy that went in and out of meetings, but I thought I could get sober through osmosis. I didn't need a sponsor. I didn't need to work the steps, and got married, adopted my oldest son, Nick, who unfortunately died from this disease 4.5, 5 years ago almost. Had 3 other kids, but I'd been about 14 months clean, not working a program, going to meetings, and I took a kid to Chicago to move out of his apartment. His roommate was doing heroin, and I tried 1 bag, and that took me down another 12-year road of opiate addiction, and overdosed 8 times, clinically dead 3, consequences, multiple DUIs. My last DUI was December 16th of 2010. I overdosed while driving. I hit 2 cars. I put 4 people in the hospital, 1 being a 9-month-old baby. And I don't remember anything because I was dead on the scene. It took 5 shots of Narcan to bring me back. And my delusional mind, I got out of jail a week later, went right back to using, got the best lawyer, slapped down 30 grand cash, said, let's beat this. They never got blood or urine, and that's where my thinking was. My lawyer said, Tim, you ain't beating anything. He said, it's your 3rd DUI, your 5th driving on revoked. They found the spoon and syringe. He said, you're going to prison. It's just a matter of how long. And I got to a point where I wanted to kill myself, but I didn't want to blow my head off. You know, if there was heaven and hell, purgatory, the recovering Catholic here, I just justified, I'll go back to using. Overdosed again, and then my oldest son and I started using together, and it got really dark, really bad. And October 30th of 2012, I was sentenced to 7 years in prison. When I walked into prison at 44 years old, I had an office in the Wrigley building on Michigan Avenue. I was making $500,000 a year, and I was sleeping under Lower Wacker Drive with the homeless people 2 to 3 nights a week, because that's where I was more comfortable instead of being in my 5-bedroom house with my wife and 4 kids, because that's where the disease of addiction takes you, with yourself, by yourself, crying to yourself. When I went into prison, I weighed 158 pounds. I was skin and bone. I was walking death. I'm 6'1". Today I'm 203, 202.
Wow.
She got me working out and eating kale and all this weird stuff. But I was profusely sick for 2 weeks straight. I didn't sleep a wink for a month, but that's where my aha moment was. I was in Northern Illinois Receiving Center waiting to figure out what prison they're transferring me to. And I looked up. I said, God, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Take away this obsession and compulsion to use, and I swear I'll turn my will and life over to you. And I said, I got one favor. Would you please let me get into Sheridan Prison? And in Illinois, there's 28 prisons. There's 2 that had therapeutic drug treatment programs, and Sheridan was one. And the next day, I was transferred to Sheridan.
Wow.
I did 13 and a half months in prison, and all I did with my former gang chief, Sally, was study the big book, the NA basic text, the Bible, read hundreds of books, went through the steps a day. I never got a TV. I wasn't there to get swollen, do push-ups for noodles, Napoleon Hill, Tony Robbins, you name it, I read it. I wrote the business plan for the foundation I started in that cell. And my wife divorced me. We lost our home in foreclosure. My oldest son was in active addiction, and I got out 3 years to the day I caught the case, December 16th of 2013. I did 13 and a half months, and when I walked out for the first time in my life, Tim Ryan was 13 and a half months clean and sober. And I had a little townhouse my former wife and mom found, so I could walk to the Alno Club, I could walk to the train, I could walk downtown. I have not had a driver's license in 18 years. I do get it back in a year. But I had a company car and a full-time driver, so that wasn't too bad. But, I got another sponsor. For 2.5 years, I never missed a meeting. I went back into the tech space 3 months in. I said, I'm done. I set up a foundation. I started a number of support groups that I'd have the parents come with the person struggling. I just wanted to help people. And then my son died on my 21-month sobriety date. And I can remember Nick had been to treatment 6 times, and at 19 months sober, Nick was in treatment for the 6th time, and he's 20 years old, and I went to meet with him, and I just started doing some few speaking events, and he looks at me and says, Dad, we got such a crazy story. He's like, we used to get high together. He said, what about me and you going and traveling the country and speaking to high school students? And I said, Nick, I love it, but you got to get sober. And he's like, don't worry, Dad, I will. I'm 30 days out of treatment. He's back in jail. Did 45 days, got out. His mom picked him up, took him to lunch, fed him, and said, we're done. 5 days out of jail, I called him, and I said, Nick, come get some Narcan. And he said, Dad, I promise you I'm not on that anymore. And 2 days later, my former wife, Shannon, called me at 6 in the morning and said, Nick overdosed again. I'm coming to get you. And we shot to Hinsdale Hospital, ran into the emergency room. Tim and Shannon Ryan to see our son Nick. And 30 seconds later, the chaplain walked out. And I knew my son was dead. And I'll ask people what was my next thought, and they'll say, you want to go get high. No, my next thought was I'll be at 6 o'clock 12-step base meeting that night. And that's what I did. And Nick died on my 21-month sobriety date. And, I carry him in this necklace here. I got his ashes in there. And ride or die, live Nick's will and God's will to the best of my ability. And for a long time, I beat myself up that I killed my own son. I had a girl speaking at a high school last year. We're doing question and answer, and she said, I've got a question for you, Mr. Ryan. I said, what's that? She said, when are you going to forgive yourself for your son dying? That knocked me off my square because Nick knew what to do.
Yeah.
But what it shifted me to do was look for more options. He had been to treatment 6 times. 3 weeks, he's out the door. I always had good insurance. I didn't know of programs like Soba and Wavelengths and these other places that have long-term continuums of care that I could have put my son in a 4 to 6 month program.
What was his treatments like? 30 days in and out?
3 weeks out the door. Maybe see a therapist twice while you're there, sit in a bunch of kumbaya groups, hang out with the guys, smoke, get more drug contacts, share war stories.
Big topic.
Do some groups, lie to your therapist,
and you're out.
And you're out
Yeah.
This is a big topic, and it's like why this magazine trying to help people.
Man,
I think we should talk about
we
this,
need
like
to.
with your recovery center, the long term. That's where it's at.
Absolutely where it's at.
I mean, and unfortunately, insurance is not like allowing kids to come in or people to come in and get sober and like actually get some foundation and a little bit of clarity,
30 days isn't enough.
Now,
Thankfully,
how old are
you
you?
do what you do.
I'm turning 37 tomorrow.
So you're 37.
Yeah.
How long did you use drugs for?
18 years.
So 18 years. So 18 years, we'll just round it to 20 years. Someone's been using for 10 years. You think 3 weeks of treatment? 4 weeks of treatment?
No, not at all.
I mean, and
anything you've been doing for that length of
Yeah.
time. And it's kind of like the when you really take a look at what's going on, and having the different levels of care and seeing the success and we've actually now gotten statistics from the insurance company, their own stats that show, and this was just in New Jersey, which is a long-term program for students, college recovery, that the emergency ER, and those, they have some kind of like a level 1 hospital visit, which means you're brought in an ambulance and all that. And that from the year prior to the year they were in treatment to the 2 years after went down 80%.
wow.
So not only did it immediately save all that money from the insurance companies, and we could show that it is saving money, because when somebody is overdosing, the cost of that is probably a year's worth of treatment cost.
Sure.
And even though we could show that we were saving them the money from it, they still can't wrap their head around it. And so you have to come to a conclusion. People take a look and go, well, the bottom line, or how they're figuring, or whatever they're doing. And I had, and I'm in a lawsuit with an insurance company right now, with an attorney in Florida that sued several. And he goes, and he said what I knew. And he goes, so you have a family plan, and you've got the one drug addict. You have the one bad finger in the hand. If you cut that finger off, you still have the 4 others that are there. The insurance company doesn't even lose their plan if they can knock them off. So they're purposely killing the addicts so they don't have to pay for them over a length of time, because they know they're going to either they're likely to relapse, they might have to go to treatment, they can get hepatitis C, they can get HIV, they can have all of these things that the insurance company, where the other 4 in the family, they're just regular people. And so it's designed to fail.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, if
disgusting.
there was any other,
It's getting me so angry.
any other kind of business that would go on, it's like mafia. It is the epitome of what they have the RICO Act for. So you have all of these companies that are pretending that they don't have anything to do with each other. Yet they'll change the rules, and the other ones will change rules, and they won't even tell anybody they're changing the rules, so that you have to spend 8 months trying to figure out what the rules are, even though they're authorizing you to treat people for a length of time. They know that extended treatment works.
Yeah.
Yet, and it's kind of like this. You can ask anybody worldwide, and I do. I take foreign people, or like a Uber driver. When we were going to meet Senator Booker, and I was reading this thing that I had from the treatment center of somebody who was denied a day. And it would have blown you away. It's kind of like if you wrote your stuff down that you were talking about, they had that, and plus. And I'm talking to the guy, and I say, so if somebody needs to go to treatment, how long would you expect them to go? What would just be a normal thing? Now, people who are a little aware will say maybe 90 days or 60, but across the world, people are going to say 30 days.
30
Right.
days, of course.
Just without, and everybody, or you might have even the people, and people don't know that 28 days was made for the military, because on the 29th day they had to get reevaluated for something, and that's where the 28-day treatment came from. So, but anybody you would ask would say 30 days. Yet you have somebody that comes in and forget about all the mental health or the abuse or the other, 90 things that can be going on with somebody. If somebody just has a drug problem or an alcohol problem, which I've really never seen that, you would think that they could walk in the door and say, I'm an alcoholic, or I have a drug problem, or whatever it is, and they go, okay, we're going to detox you and you're going to be here 30 days. Yet I got to have guys that are calling up in the on a daily basis. They've got to fight and
Fight
fight
for
and
days,
fight
yep.
and fight to get them 3 days.
Right,
And,
it's-
and I got guys that they're walking around in circles in the thing, still basically just barely getting on their feet, and they're going, okay, they're good for IOP. And I go, good for IOP. So what happens? So what happened to me is I go, I'm not doing that. The therapist, everybody knows that this person is not ready to go home and try to show up and sign up for an IOP and come 3 nights a week and stay off drugs, even though they're from all of that stuff. They're doomed, and they're still barely even detoxed. So I said, I'm gonna let them stay. And then I get in trouble.
You get
from
in
the
trouble for
insurance
doing
company.
that.
And I sat with the insurance company in a lawsuit, and they go, we know that you're letting somebody stay longer than they're authorized. And I go, yeah, I'm doing that. And they go, we know that you're providing these things for them. I go, yeah, I'm doing that. And they go, okay, so you either pay us the money, and it was a shakedown.
Right.
It was a full-on shakedown. You pay us $500,000 in cash, and we'll just let all of this go.
That is disgusting.
Just like that.
That makes
it
me
was
so
a whole.
sick.
We had gone through all our charts and clinical stuff and spent thousands of hours getting all this information, because they come in and they go, we're going to take an audit on you. We're going to authorize you to treat people for up to even for as long as you want. It
Right.
could be
Right.
6 months, knowing that we're not going to pay you, which anywhere else, if I have you fix my house knowing I'm not going to pay you, that's fraud.
Right.
And we're going to authorize these services, but there's a little asterisk that says, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get paid. Or we're going to pay you, and then we're going to come back and sue you to grab it all back. And anything we can do to put you out of business. And they do it under the guise of, they go, oh, there's some bad actors out there, so we needed to do this stuff, and we had to adjust the rates, and we had to make all of these complicated situations for centers to get rid of the bad actors. And they did it under the guise, but what they really wanted to do is they wanted to get rid of the good ones.
Sure.
Because the good ones were saving lives.
So that's what's happened too, Way. I worked in the South Florida area for the past 4 years. And yeah, the Kenny Chapmans of the world and the Sober Home Task Force did some good things, but what it also did, there's some really good programs to where the insurance companies that you're talking about said, all right, we're going to do an audit. We're not paying you, and you wouldn't get paid for 6 to 12 months. They couldn't keep their payroll or couldn't afford to keep their doors open, so they had to close down. Oh, see, they must be shady. This is the only industry I've seen. This is the sickest industry I've ever worked in. From the hate, that everything should be for free. Oh, you have a for-profit treatment center. Any business in the world is there to make money. Well, you should be non-for-profit. Really? Look at Hazleton. They're a non-for-profit treatment center. Look at the millions of dollars they bring in. Caron Foundation is also a non-for-profit. Good programs, but people can float under that. But everyone wants it to be for free. I had to get some dental implants. Should I call my oral surgeon and say, hey, Johnny, can you scholarship me a few implants? The transmission in my truck went out. Hey, Mark, can you scholarship me a transmission? What?
Yeah. Well, it's not only that. It's the thing about it is that if you're going to, and this one was after we went through this audit and paid the shakedown money and everything else, and their thing is this: we know we owe you millions of dollars. If you pay us this money, we're going to pay you those millions of dollars, which they didn't. And I go, well, if you're going to screw me, just tell me ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to pay me for something, don't make me work to get nothing. So when we would spend $100 to get paid $1, it seemed. Our administrative costs went up, and it gets to a point where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're working in recovery, it's because you like helping people.
Absolutely.
That's what you do. And I like being the guy on the porch, and I'd love doing the intake calls, and I would have a mom on the phone who is in crisis, and I would say, tell me what's going on, and they would just throw it out. And then I would always say, I can help you with that. And I knew I could, because at that particular time, we were actually getting paid reasonably. We were getting paid on time. We were getting paid, it was about, we knew we could expect to get about half of what our bill charges were. And so we could provide, with that money, we could provide the top quality treatment that you needed. Because they took a look and they would all go, you need to go into the network or do whatever it is, and go, okay, so what am I going to do with $400 in a day? The addictionologist come in and do a psych evaluation, that's $480. The doctor coming in doing the initial detox, that's $380. She comes every day. You couldn't even afford to, just on the visits from the doctor in the week, it would eat up all the money.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be accredited, so you have to have safety and maintenance, and you have to have top quality. I want to have my loved ones speaking to somebody who's qualified in addiction, who has a master's level degree. They're trauma certified. They do EMDR because this person has trauma and they need to have that, but I got to have them go to the EMDR guy. That's $500. So if I had to do that, I would charge for that. And they would pay me enough that I could provide the highest quality treatment. And guess what happened? So our original for my treatment center, the design was this: to give the highest quality treatment for the longest length of time for the least amount of money. And we were able to do that. And it was a shame when they were sitting there and giving me this. I've got a mom on my phone whose daughter she found her daughter overdosed with a heroin needle in her neck. Her husband has brain cancer, is on hospice, and she doesn't know where her other daughter is, and she needs $13,000 copay and deductible to get in. And I say, can you get her to the airport? Just get her on a plane. Let me take care of your kid.
Yeah.
How do you say no?
I know.
So I told those guys, I go, you want to come sue me? You want to do this? For being generous? So let's go, because it's going to expose you for what you are. You're criminals, you're murderers, you're killing people. And so finally, this documentary that we're doing is on that. It's called Death by Denial, is the original title to it. But it is, I had enough. I went to Senator Booker and met with him in his office with Andy Dick, Daniel Baldwin, Alec Baldwin, and their sister, Beth Baldwin, because I have a Baldwin wing because we've treated so many of them coming through. But we went and met him, and I told him with the Obamacare plans, the California covered, somebody goes and they have a Blue Cross Blue Shield and that, or whatever it is, policy, PPO, that they can go in and they have the money to go in and pay the copay or deductible, which they've jacked now to 10 grand.
10, 25,000, sure.
So my kid needs treatment, but I just need $25,000 copay to get them in. And the treatment center knows they're going to get paid 3%. 3%. And they didn't tell anybody this. So we had over 200 clients that were on those type of policies. And I went and begged Senator Booker, begged him to do something. I said, listen, this is going to be like a Schindler's List that we're going to be making. I've got to go back, and not only am I going to have to let go of 100 employees, I'm going to have to shut down 5 different centers that have people actively in treatment doing well. But I'm going to have to tell this group of kids they got to leave, or we go out of business. And they're going to die. Do you realize they're going to die? In his office, the assistant, the healthcare lady, was weeping at the story I was telling because her sister's fiance had overdosed the day before.
Jeez.
And he promised that he would do something. So I see him running for president, and I'm going with the moms who have the kids who, just like your kid, and the treatment centers, they have that available to do.
Sure.
They could do that, but it's not profitable to them.
Right.
My secondary, third, fourth part of my program, that's not the big profit center. It's the Get Better Center. It's I have to have somebody go from detox to vocational. Because I got a 21-year-old kid who the best thing he knows about is how to deal drugs, how to get drugs, how to steal shit, how to do whatever it is that he's doing. That's all on his resume. Or he dropped out of school, dropped out of college, lost his job, his driver's license is messed up. He's got court issues that he needs to deal with. Now, this new, fresh, sober kid is supposed to handle that on his own.
Yeah.
So I had case managers from the beginning making sure when these kids walked out the door, they had something to walk into. And they were living in communities of sober kids where they weren't the oddball. The guy coming in trying to score dope, he'd have the community jump on him going, dude, you're not going to do that here. And it was this like self-guarded, beautiful thing. And there was 100 of them at the time. And they were all doing well. And when one started going south or stepping off, they would grab them and bring them back in.
That's great.
And it was working. And it's like it's a shame that that's not the standard protocol for treatment.
Yep.
People walk in, should be automatic, 30 days for sure, right? Why does Terry have to get on the phone and call every 3 days and go, this kid is really sick, he can't sleep, he's not doing, he's this, he's that, and they go, okay, well, we'll give him one more day.
Well, you know, it's crazy how they're changing it, too, where I recently moved from the Chicagoland area, and with our nonprofit, we helped anyone. No insurance, state insurance. So I had a gentleman call me first week into January, and he said, Tim, I relapsed. I need to get into detox. And I said, well, here, you can go to XYZ. He said, they won't take me. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they changed the laws in Illinois to where if you're on state insurance and you go to detox and treatment, you cannot go back for 90 days.
That's horrible.
The kid went into a hospital, into the ER, pulling the I'm going to kill myself card. They denied him. They would not take him. So these are the laws they're putting in place to set people up to die.
That's insane.
It is.
It's insane.
It's mind-blowing to me because, like, Tim and I have been speaking everywhere, and you know, I suffer from depression. After all this time, you know, it took like months for me to finally get diagnosed. It's depression. But like what I've found out is that it's about 75% of addicts and alcoholics out there that are going to come in and get sober or going to try to get sober. They're suffering from mental illness, whether it be anxiety, which is mental illness, whether it be trauma. We're all trauma survivors of some sort, you know, and like they don't want to address that, you know.
They don't.
They don't want to address that.
They deal with the substance
They'll
abuse.
give you pain medication
Yeah.
at doctors, but they won't want to address you having, you know,
Yeah.
anxiety or whatnot, you know, and insurance is, you know, doesn't want to cover, you know, for the most part, that kind of, help or medication. And it's mind blowing. We were in Woodstock, Connecticut speaking. Am I correct? Woodstock.
Yes, ma'am.
We go there a couple months ago, and they don't, if their child dies of an overdose, they won't put a tombstone on their tombstone. They won't
They don't have obituaries.
They won't put them in the obituaries, and they'll say they die from an asthma attack. And yet there's only one treatment center for females in Woodstock, but you can't like go.
They don't
can't,
talk
there's
about
no
it.
sober livings. There's no treatment centers, and they're living in the 1950s. Yet they had the state, and yet they had 5 ice trucks come in last year to throw body
Store
bags
bodies.
in, throw, as I was told, throw body bags in there because they didn't have enough room in the morgues. But there's no problem going on.
And that's so one of the
Can you believe that?
It's unbelievable.
They're not- I mean-
so that's
Yeah, when they're out and about doing stuff, you know, it's when we're here and we can get in our life and our bubble and our stuff. But when these guys are on the road seeing this stuff, it just is.
it's mind blowing.
It's horrifying.
What's
It
it going to
is
take
really
to
horrifying.
change
You
that? What's it going to,
I was-
how are we
can
going
I-
to change it?
Can I just tell you that
Yeah.
yesterday I was in high heels and I was all like done up and I was doing something, and then I got called to go do a pickup, and I ended up being in basically a motel, which was like a trap
House Motel.
trying to get 3 girls out by myself with a driver, but it was me. And like to get these girls and like to see the people, we're in the trenches. I'm getting them in Orange County. Like, I mean, it was, and I'm texting, I'm like, I'm in heels. Like, what am I doing? I don't even have water. I just like literally had phones and didn't even have a bag. And like, but this is what it
This
takes.
is going on
This
here.
is going on here, there, and everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah,
So we don't want to
everywhere.
talk about it, and thankfully we can now. Not we don't want to talk about it.
So you had asked a question, what do we do about this? That's why Jennifer and I came together. And I have my platform. She had her platform. And I said, first off, there's a lot of men doing what I do, speaking and interventions, whatever. The women are not getting the credit. But on the flip side, I haven't met many women like Jennifer that are 13 plus years that have all this mental health, suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction, eating disorders that have turned their lives around and are willing to be fully transparent and share. And I said, let's start doing this together. So we aren't, and of course we fell in love and all that cool stuff happened too.
That happened after.
Doesn't suck. But we're a force, and as Greg said, we're all over the country. We're from the hills of Kentucky to Connecticut to Northern California to Michigan. But we see what's going on. This country is desperate for people like us to come in and offer hope, but then be able to offer the solutions and educate. Here's what's available here. Here's what people don't know what they don't know.
We were 3 hours outside of Chicago. It was deep in Illinois. I don't know where. It was 3 hours. I just know. We're there. It's farmland, right? And I'm like, what am I going to tell them? Like, I was on the cover of Vogue in the movie Blow.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and we go in there, and Tim started, and we asked principal, like, what is their biggest thing right now? Like, is there what drugs are you seeing? He says, and the counselors there say, we don't see anything. Maybe a little problems at home, like with their parents or this and that, but there's no drug use. He asked a question. How many guys here?
I'll ask the kids, how many of you have a friend that smokes weed? Every hand goes up. Drinks, every hand goes up.
Out of 300 people, 290 raise their hand. How many people have tried a drug or like in?
But then I'll get into crystal
The
meth or
teachers were like,
opiates
"What?"
or pain pills.
All of
Because
them,
you
all
don't
of them.
talk about
They
it.
don't talk about it. Everyone's got their
No,
heads
if
in the
they
sand.
talk about it, they have to deal with it.
Bingo.
Exactly.
Their job is just to navigate them through and get them out.
And do as little work as possible.
Yeah, if they have that, they don't want to talk about it.
and
Because
so
if I acknowledge it, then it becomes my problem.
Greg, you bring
Exactly,
up a great
exactly.
point. There has been one high school last year, over 220 speaking events. One high school I've spoken in the United States that had a full-time substance abuse and mental health counselor on staff. One. That's it. And that was in Long Island, New York. That is the only high school that I've ever spoken. Have you ever spoken, any, Jen, that had?
I did about close to 200,
But
about
had
190
how many-
speaking places, and not one.
Nobody.
It's unbelievable.
So these kids, and
Why
it's,
would you have that?
and it's
Crazy.
it's the social media, it's the bullying, it's the trying to fit in, it's the instant gratification. Greg's been working since he was 6, 7, 8, 10 years old. I'll guarantee it. You probably have too. I started working at 9. All she did was push donkeys around in carts for a while. Only joking. But there's no work ethic today. It's
the
all
social
entitlement.
media thing.
Oh, it's
That
just
filtered
horrendous.
world
it's
we live
fake.
in.
People see what magical lies, but people don't go on. You're not going to brag about how you have a problem with addiction,
Right.
I think I'm not a professional in this field like you or maybe you, but I feel the biggest thing is what we're doing now is being vocal about it.
Talking about it.
Telling people that, dude, you can beat addiction. Because I know when I was in the depths, there's no way I would ever think I'd be sitting right here
Amen.
doing this, and all these amazing stories like you hanging yourself. Look where you're at now. You
Yeah,
you
that's a
have
good
a
one.
gnarly story and you own the biggest rehabs in America. Like it can be done, but not enough people are talking about it. And somebody like you that's doing something about it, meeting Congress and
That's
what you
in
guys
the
are doing
trenches
together.
too. See, there's a lot of owners of treatment centers, and I'm all for people start a business, do what you want, but they're not in recovery. They're not in the trenches, and the ones that are truly the ones that are making a difference. But I'm telling you, it gets Jennifer and I get arrows shot at us because we're in a relationship, because I had been married before, because I run a nonprofit that I've never taken a dollar from and help people. It is mind-boggling the hate that is out there, but it's all the keyboard cowboys. And
Of course.
I tell people, if you want to get to know who I am, here's my cell phone. Pick me up, call me. I'll meet you anywhere, anytime.
What are you guys doing now as a team? Are you guys just going around the country speaking at schools? Is that you
No,
guys' main
we're
deal?
doing no.
What is
you
that?
know, we're cutting back on the schools because there's only a couple good adolescent programs, but it's more. Well, I'll let you.
My whole philosophy was like I got sober to live, a life. That was my thing. Like I got sober. My new thing is like, I got sober and I want to find happy, and like I've been able to find happy, and I've been able to learn to have boundaries, and so he's been on the road for 5 years. I've been on the road about 5-6 years. I've been on the road for 6 years. Like it's been nothing but planes, and I want to build a life, and we teamed up, and when he started talking to me and he's like, let's do this together. Everything he was talking about is everything I had always wanted to do and that I've talked about, or at least the people around in my tight circle have known that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, let's do this. Walk your talk, and he's walked his talk along the way.
So what
and
is it that you guys are doing?
So we still do. We do the speaking, but we're more selective on our time's valuable.
Yeah.
We pulled out of some just because it's time, but it's also a couple we're doing are with healthcare providers in the insurance space on insurance payer providers. We do interventions. We work in the treatment space. We do a lot of community events and educate, but we're also in the trenches too. We've got a
reality show,
a
documentary
we're working on, and a documentary. We've got a lot of neat things, but it's in print, in radio, and podcast, and wherever
I'm a writer
we are.
for Recovery Today magazine.
But it's carrying the message out there. I mean, I wake up at 5:15, my phone is ringing.
5:15. I mean, the other night there was somebody that was coming into treatment, and the kid was like jumping out of Ubers from Vegas, and it was a 2-hour night sleep and the night before, and it was working with the parents.
It was a
a lot of
weekend
times we'll
process.
help people get into treatment, but
Yeah.
what we realized is working with the family, they're more sick, we went in and did an intervention in Florida. We've done a few in Florida. We've done them all over, but it's working with the family afterwards. And it's like getting them at least a little foundation to start getting better. And it's their choice because, the addict and the alcoholic, like they're very intelligent people, and there's hope when they get into treatment that they can get better and they start feeling better and getting better. But the family and loved ones, they stay sick.
Yeah.
And like, now it's like I'm codependent. Like I thank God for Al-Anon now for me, like, and I've had to deal with all that stuff, but I can't condone that anymore.
And we can't keep it's having the boundaries, but we're kind of the concierge of the industry too. Somebody calls and says, I have a 17-year-old daughter that's struggling with this. I know 3 places immediately where to go. But a lot of people don't know how to navigate the system. And we're also partnered up with Rehab.com, which is the only transparent website out there, a portal to find treatment that's not owned by a treatment center. They're the Expedia treatment. And I try to educate. All right, if you're in Kentucky and you have an HMO, you can go to this site and search every center that's there. You can read what they offer and make your own biased decision on where you want your loved one to go. Because people get on the internet and read and go instead of talking to someone. And Greg will spend as much time as he needs on the phone to educate a family or someone as you would, or Jennifer or I will. And
the phones are always
that's what we
ringing
do.
for us.
I think it's amazing how you guys linked up and doing what you guys are doing.
And we're just getting started, man. We're just
so
getting
passionate
started
about helping people. Like that has been like I always, like I said, I always ask for a bigger platform. And yes, I'm still acting and I'm still doing things and all that, but when I see a flicker of light when I'm speaking and I see in someone like just a little glimpse of hope, or like they laugh or they cry or they go, God, that girl's crazy, I never want her story.
Yeah.
Or some kind of like, emotion coming out of them, I'm like, that's it. There's no price on that,
Yeah,
and
there
to
isn't.
give people hope to like get better, because this is an epidemic. It is happening everywhere. By breaking my anonymity on the, Sober Rehabs and the Sober House shows, it went worldwide, those shows. And till this day, I'll still get emails from people going, that was me or my daughter, or thank you for being part of this movement. But what I've realized is that there's not one person in this universe that's not affected by someone who is either, in the disease, or it may be someone they know, someone they work with, someone they live by, someone they live with in their home, some hapless passerby, an employer, it's somebody. There's somebody out there. We're all suffering. That means we're in the disease with them.
And that's
You
why
know.
people like you, Greg, that's what's going to make a difference.
There's
I
no
think.
shame.
Yeah,
You know, there's
there
no
isn't.
shame. Let's end this stigma.
And
People
by
are dying.
giving back, it's helping you. It's helping you. It
Absolutely.
helps me. It helps.
Sober
you
is
know.
cool.
Yeah,
by the way.
sober
It is
rocks.
really cool.
Sober's
Sobriety
sexy.
does
Let's
not
just get it-
suck.
let's
Still
just get
go
that one
out and
down.
have fun. You could still
I'm
do everything
crazier
you
now.
do.
Out,
Exactly.
like,
We
you
have
know,
more
I'm more
fun
comfortable
now
in my own
than-
skin.
yeah.
Took
A
hot
lot of
minute.
people forget, but in this article, we'll have all the information to get how to reach you guys, and of course, sober recovery. And thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
much
Thank
for
you.
coming
Truly
in.
an honor.
Thank you
Amazing
so much for
story.
having us.
Greg. This was a
Glad to be
really,
here.
really great interview, and yeah, thank you guys once again. This was a good one.